Un poco.
Mr. Eagleburg, as you have, and I don't mean to be dispassionate about this either, as you've
Look, recently and formerly a director of the CIA.
Some routine appearances, and then was flown for his protection to an Air Force facility in Louisiana, and then on to another military facility in Nebraska. It was there that the president first had a meeting with his national security advisors via telephone, and then here at the White House tonight, even just a short time ago, a meeting with his national security team and other cabinet officials ended. Of course, they did discuss the issue of options, but they don't want to say too much about that tonight. They wanted to talk much more about the victims. However, there was a hint in some of the remarks the president made tonight. In one of the statements he made in his televised speech, the president said, "We will make no distinction between terrorists and those who harbor them." That's about all we heard in the way of possible options for retaliation from this White House tonight. At another point, Ari Fleischer, the president's spokesperson, was asked, well, what about the president? Isn't he angry? Isn't he as angry as a lot of the American public about all this? Ari Fleischer's response, he has a steely demeanor. He's been showing a steely demeanor, a steely resolve all day. His only angry words, tough words they're described, were saved in private for those who committed these acts of terrorism today. Here's a little bit more of what the president said earlier this evening.
Today our nation saw evil, the very worst of human nature. And we responded with the best of America, with the daring of our rescue workers, with the caring for strangers and neighbors who came to give blood and help in any way they could.
In his speech, the president said that the attackers today attacked a way of life in America, freedom in this country, and will not be allowed to stand. Of course, the difficulty will be finding precisely who was involved and then targeting them. It is definitely on the minds of people here in this administration this evening. And Brian, if I may, I was here this morning when this all began, and another interesting aspect of things, you see where we stand right here in this narrow patch right off the driveway leading to the West Wing. What happened at first when we were out here giving reports as the first plane and then even the second plane hit the World Trade Towers, we were still out here. We were told we might have to evacuate. But then they kept changing their minds and there was confusion. All of a sudden, as soon as word filtered out that a plane had hit the Pentagon, you actually saw people running, staffers running, chefs in full dress, if you will, in their uniforms, cooks, by the 50s, by the hundreds, running out these doors, running down the driveway out toward Lafayette Park. This place was cleared. All of a sudden, the uniformed and non-uniformed protective services were out with their guns up, out of their holsters. We were then pushed into Lafayette Park across the street. A short time later, a block away from there, and then eventually 2 blocks away. And now there's a perimeter 3 blocks around the White House, and security is that tight at this place at this time.
A very tense day at the White House. Correspondent Bob Kerr, thank you.
Difficult to find any of those cockpit voice recorders or flight data recorders intact if the modules which are encapsulated inside the container or the orange painted part of the
military retaliation.
Well, fighting for
has it.
There's a high probability that the information on those boxes may be good, but I wouldn't hang a lot of hope on that.
And now I realize that you were very different from the FAA. And it's the aviation security system around the country that's the FAA's business. However, I'd like to get your comment.
Of all people, because of a threat.
Collect an enormous amount of material. It's analogous to picking that particular golden needle out of that haystack in order to convert all that collection into usable intelligence.
Senator Bob Graham, you've heard the arguments pro and con. Yes, it's definitely bin Laden. Indications and intelligence information has bin Laden. And on the other side, some are saying, wait just a minute, this kind of operation may well have had some kind of state sponsorship and financing. How do you come out on that argument?
How I come out on that is we need to move as expeditiously but also as carefully as possible to identify who was the perpetrator. You recall after Oklahoma City there was an immediate assumption that this must have been an Islamic group. It turned out to be a U.S. militia group that had committed that heinous offense. We are going to respond very aggressively.
Connection with. Some of us were there at the time. Just go back one, would you please? That was the suicide car bombing on the Marine. Could we go back one? Is that possible? Thank you. The attack on the Marine barracks in Beirut. And you may recall that
Have to find
Who the enemy was because
got involved.
One or two of the floors collapsed. One or two. It would have created a pancake effect of one massive floor caving into the next, going all the way down 110 floors.
I understand we have Grant Rampey, and we have
Sure.
to go to him right now.
Okay.
Grant, are you with us
In Washington.
in Washington?
Indeed, Marta and Hal, and as I listen to you talk about what you see as the devastation up in New
Y allí se dirigen en estos momentos ya con equipos pesados los miembros de las cuadrillas de rescate. Vamos con Mirka de Llano y una información que nos tiene preparada para este programa especial.
El terrorista más temido del mundo, Osama Bin Laden, hoy permanece rodeado de seguridad en su santuario en Afganistán. Bin Laden está amparado por el Talibán, el gobierno no reconocido de Afganistán. Se dice que Bin Laden lleva a cabo su guerra santa con sus teléfonos celulares y sus computadoras. El hombre controla unos $300 millones y puede ordenar una masacre con solo presionar un botón de su computadora. Su misión principal es declarar una guerra masiva contra los Estados Unidos e Israel y dedica sus esfuerzos a urgirle a los musulmanes a través del mundo a que ataquen a los objetivos estadounidenses, tanto militares como civiles. A pesar de sus millones de dólares a través del mundo, el terrorista que viaja en un jet privado a Irán, Suiza, las Filipinas, entre otros países, es un enigma para el mundo. Supuestamente este hijo de un negociante saudita multimillonario vive en una especie de caverna, tiene 4 esposas y come extremadamente poco. Su vivienda es un escondite y permanece un secreto para el mundo. Además, Bin Laden cambia de residencia constantemente para que no puedan capturarlo. Washington ha ofrecido una recompensa de $5 millones por su captura y esta misma semana el director de la CIA dijo que Bin Laden es la amenaza más grande a la seguridad de los Estados Unidos.
Ese era un perfil de este hombre que se ha transformado en estos momentos para las autoridades de los Estados Unidos, para los servicios de inteligencia, en uno de los más buscados del mundo entero. Los atentados de hoy a las Torres Gemelas no resultan ser el primer atentado que ha sufrido este importante centro turístico y comercial de Nueva York. Y nuestra compañera Mercedes Soler nos habla del violento pasado que encierra a este famoso edificio.
Las llamas de fuego que consumieron el World Trade Center hoy calcinaron el alma de todo un país. Sus Torres Gemelas, uno de los centros turísticos más famosos del mundo, se derrumbaron una tras la otra después del siniestro atentado, convirtiéndose en tumbas para un sinnúmero de víctimas. Si bien hoy ya no existen las torres, este no es el único atentado contra el World Trade Center en Manhattan. En febrero de 1998, un coche bomba estalló en uno de los estacionamientos, arrebatándole la vida a 6 personas y dejando a unas 1,000 heridas. 6 militantes islámicos fueron enjuiciados por conspirar para realizar ese atentado, que también tenía como objetivo otro ataque en contra de las Naciones Unidas que nunca se llegó a realizar. Todos ellos recibieron condenas de cadena perpetua. El cabecilla era Ramzi Youssef y su cómplice principal fue Eyad Ismoil. Ismoil fue hallado culpable de cargar el camión con 1,200 libras de explosivos, manejarlo hasta el World Trade Center y prender la llama que hizo detonar los explosivos. Ambos escaparon en otro carro y finalmente fueron arrestados, Youssef en Pakistán e Ismoil en Jordania. Hasta entonces ese había sido el peor ataque terrorista perpetrado en suelo norteamericano. Pero hace unos 3 años surgió la figura tenebrosa de Osama Bin Laden, un multimillonario militante islámico de Arabia Saudita, quien ha declarado una guerra terrorista en contra de los Estados Unidos.
Bueno, pues bien, esa famosa vista de Manhattan, donde se distinguían perfectamente bien estas 2 torres gemelas, ya no existe, porque esas dos torres, que fueron ya escenario de un atentado anteriormente, se desplomaron completamente esta mañana después de haberse estrellado dos aviones. Allí tienen algunos datos interesantes de estas torres. Fueron construidas, o mejor dicho, su construcción terminó en 1973, costaron 750 millones de dólares, tenían 110 pisos cada una, es decir, si medimos en pies, 1.368 pies una y la otra 1.362 pies. Trabajaban en base diaria unos 50.000 empleados, se cree que hoy había unos 40.000 en su interior cuando comenzó el primer atentado, cuando se estrelló el primer avión. Tenía 43.600.
Said that they saw the plane actually flying upside down with the tail down and that it plunged into the earth at least a 60-degree angle, possibly straight down, which would account for the small crater about 20 feet around and at least 10 or 20 feet deep. The bulk of the remains of that plane and all the 45 people who are on board may be buried deep in that crater just in the field beyond these trees here.
Dick, of course, you know that many people believe the plane, where it crashed wasn't the intended place for that plane to go down, that it was, in fact, Camp David, the presidential retreat.
Yes, the plane originated in Newark, New Jersey, 38 passengers, 7 crew. It was bound for San Francisco. It crashed here about 80 or so miles southeast of Pittsburgh, but the plane may have been headed back around to the Washington area. That's one theory and one of the intended targets, and it's still a matter of great speculation, and it is really one of the foremost theories here in Pennsylvania is that the plane was headed for Camp David, but fell far short. Why it fell here into this rural area, no one knows yet, and that will be the focus of the investigation here throughout the night. And
Marcia will hunt down and punish those responsible.
One church in Prince George's County, the congregation has special...
No idea what to think.
We're not releasing any luggage until it's all been inspected. So
many passengers were already boarded and on the tarmac when they got word that something was very wrong.
We were just about to walk on the plane when I got a call from my brother saying that they had hijacked planes and that we shouldn't get on the plane.
You know, we were sitting on the plane, a couple guys, a guy from JP Morgan was next to me. We just sat there devastated. And so, of course, we both take out our cell phones and try to get as much information as possible. And then we heard about the Pentagon, and it's just amazing. And it was a LA flight, which I have been on from here this morning, that was crashed into one of the towers. It's devastating.
Massport then secured the area and quickly removed everyone from all terminals. Hours later, Logan Airport is a virtual ghost town. Again, Logan Airport is closed indefinitely. However, we are seeing a bit more activity on the tarmac than we had been before. Unsure if those are investigators on the tarmac or if there is going to be some kind of aircraft leaving Logan Airport headed to New York to help out. Now, as for the passengers, as you heard them say, this was simply surreal for them, shocking. And then when they learned that the two planes that did hit the Twin Towers at the World Trade Center originated in Boston, there were the questions. Was I standing next to this person in line at the ticket terminal? Was I going through the security checkpoint with them? Did I have coffee with them and speak to these people who were responsible for this? So a lot of questions tonight here in Boston and across the country. Not many answers. That's the latest from...
Try.
The first task...
Who is behind it? What happens next? The deadliest attack ever to strike America. As terror hits home.
Good evening once again from CBS News World Headquarters in New York. CBS's live special coverage of the attack on America continues. Now, one of the headlines of this hour from the Reuters news agency. Reuters news agency reports, and Reuters is the one carrying this, 800 dead at the Pentagon. However, when one checks in a little further, Reuters' source on the story would be considered by CBS News, at least we put it in the skeptical category for the moment. And David Martin is going to bring us up to date in a few moments directly from the Pentagon on that.
I know that there's great concern over what the numbers of people lost
at the Pentagon.
The answer.
My role is to work with them.
happened is that those buildings did collapse. We know that, and they collapsed on many of the people who'd arrived there to rescue the people who died, the people who'd been injured in the initial explosions. After those collapses, you saw.
All right, I'm up. At this point, and we're going to keep praying and hoping that we save as many people as possible.
Mr. Mayor, there are reports that there are a group of survivors in the basement of the World Trade Center, that they have cell phones. They've been calling their relatives in Seattle to tell them precisely where they are, and that there's a group of NYPD police who are with them and alive and well. Do you know about that?
I know that rescue effort's been going on for a couple of hours, yes.
Mayor, do you know anything about the report about the possible explosives that were found in New Jersey?
Yeah, I think the police commissioner was able to get information about that.
I just got a confirmation from the chief of detectives. He's reached out to the FBI. They have confirmed that someone has been stopped in New Jersey, 3 men in a van. However, there was no explosives in the van. All right, they're being held for questioning.
Where in New Jersey?
I can't say yet. Okay.
Why were they stopped, and why do you think they're connected with this?
We can't tell at this point. It's between the FBI and the Port Authority. We just got the confirmation by phone after I left the last briefing.
Were they on the George Washington Bridge as they were heading to?
No, they weren't.
There were rumors that there were explosives. Well, where did those rumors come from, or why did that begin to circulate?
I can't tell you.
Were they in the Meadowlands, Police Commissioner?
Excuse me?
Were they in the Meadowlands?
It's my understanding, but we haven't confirmed that.
Do we know why they were stopped, sir?
Not yet.
Commissioner, can you tell us anything about the rescue of the 2 Port Authority officers or the ongoing effort with the people in the basement, where the Port Authority officers were pulled out of, or details?
We can't say yet. It was Trinity and Church where the officers were that were just pulled out. The other people that are still in the building, we can't tell exactly where they are.
We all know that the Port Authority is housed in the World Trade Center. Any idea of the status of their operations?
They've lost a lot of people, and we don't know the full dimension of that either. But the Port Authority have a lot of people that are missing, and we were fortunate to find 2 of the police officers. We'll keep searching for the others, but they have sustained a lot of losses.
The group of people with the cell phones that Marcia referred to, do you have any idea how big a group that size is in that particular location?
I don't think we know the exact numbers. We know it's more than 2 people. It's 2 people. Two people communicated, and they say there were more people there.
And do you know
who are
what
living around the city?
Typically, Europe
actually work. The FAA
energy is a newer model.
As you look back at the devastation, and you can see where the 757 American Airlines that was hijacked by the group of terrorists who were at the controls, when they slammed the plane into the side of the building, the plane sliced deeply into the building. What you're looking at here is called the E-ring. There are 5 rings to this building, and the plane...
We had...
So what?
Prescott, pledge
for the damage occurred.
Start handling.
24 personas, hombres y mujeres, perecieron de esta forma. En los edificios aledaños empezaron a evacuar. Miles abandonaron sus centros de trabajo. Miles corrían por llegar a casa, por salvar sus vidas, por contar sus historias.
Aún después de haber grabado estas imágenes, de haber visto estas imágenes en vivo y en directo, realmente nos embarga la emoción de haber contemplado esta tragedia, no solamente de haberla visto, como repito, personalmente, sino de haber presenciado, y creo que todos los que estuvimos ahí, lo que realmente nos conmovió hasta las lágrimas, como decíamos en el informe, es ver a estas personas tirándose del edificio solamente ante las 2 posibilidades que tenían, que morir, llamas, o optar, que fue lo que hicieron.
World Trade Center used to exist, but now rescue workers pouring through the rubble. 2 quick things to update you on the New York story. First, in that rubble, the mayor of New York City has just confirmed that 2 police officers have...
People, I think, are going to be unable to pull out. So we'll just keep working on it. I have a number I'd like to get. We haven't been able to make any contact with the families because we're still unsure. So the number for the families has not. At least tell them that that this is a person that's missing, or that we have had some contact with this person. The number would be 718-999 2541 is the number that we'll be using at Fire Department headquarters.
What about
It's just for
what
firefighters.
about Chief Dan?
Just for firefighters, firefighters and fire officers, EMS personnel. I would we'll man those numbers. That number will roll over to 10 lines, and we'll be able to just try to give them some information. We don't have a lot, so that's why we haven't been calling them like we would normally do.
How close
What about the
teams
top members of your staff who may have been lost?
get to Debbie as ever would?
I'm sorry.
What about the top members of your staff who may be lost?
We've notified their families already. Spoke to them earlier.
How do you feel about that?
How do I feel about it? I don't know what to say. We lost people that have given over 40 years. Commissioner Feehan has had every job in the department. Probably the most valuable person in the department. When I got this job, the mayor and Commissioner Safer said, make sure you keep Bill Feehan. Haven't regretted that one day. He's given a whole life to this department. Chief Gansey, the same thing. Chief of Department, 33 years, 34 years. Ray Downey, we just honored him with a dinner. Almost 40 years of service. World renowned for situations like this. Telling me how dangerous it was when we first got there. All the possibilities, everything that he was trying to do to, get the people out. Father Judge, I don't know if you know Father Judge, one of the nicest men you could possibly find.
Right, Rock City.
The best people.
The Wounded City. They've got in Lower Manhattan an enormous rescue operation.
It's just
By spirit.
It's the most tragic thing that has happened to America by far. I've been on the fire department 20 years and never lived through this. I lived through 2 collapses today. I'm on vacation from the fire department. I came in on my own. My car's all wrecked. And I just came in to help people and do my job.
And those who perished in the planes also phoning to warn the world that they were now riding in weapons of war.
We've been attacked. It's like World War II. It's World War II. This is unbelievable.
Was there no defense for the Pentagon? And what happened aboard the flight that crashed outside Pittsburgh? We've heard a story that the pilot refused to hurl his plane on Washington and crashed in a field instead. Hospitals filled with wounded, strangers volunteering to give blood. In the ashes, rededication by a nation whose symbol is the eagle because it is the bird least afraid of a storm, the bird strong enough to soar through and above it.
As we said, we want to try to get you close to this. And one of the difficulties at the Pentagon has been that ABC's John McWethy, who has an office for ABC News in the Pentagon, was on the other side of the Pentagon complex from where this attack took place this morning. You know, there were 4 aircraft involved. One of them crashed in rural Pennsylvania, but an American Airlines plane, American Flight 11, on which 81 passengers and 11 crew died.
That was a company. It was a group. No, it was.
It's on alert. Thousands of officers were placed on standby. Its air group and other units were called up.
We have our arson explosive bomb squad details on 12 and 12 schedules, and they are staged in appropriate parts of the county so they can respond at any moment.
Officials at all levels say events will dictate the action they take, but they all agree with Chief Parks. The city is as safe as it can be, but there are no guarantees against the kind of war the United States is now caught up in. From downtown Los Angeles, Warren Wilson, KTLA News.
Well, that gives us a pretty good insight into the kind of precautions that were taken here.
Widely believed by people.
Yeah.
And with great...
And well, they might, and we suspect, and we will probably hear more about this, maybe overnight.
American Air.
El alcalde, y aparentemente han tenido noticias de que hay...
Vamos a establecer contacto en Washington ahora con nuestro compañero Pablo Gatto. ¿Qué novedades tienes para nosotros, Pablo?
Bueno, sabemos que el Consejo Nacional de Seguridad está reunido, que obviamente están analizando todo lo que está ocurriendo.
Help evacuate. in that period of time between the first attack by the airplane until the first building came down. We're hopeful because we saw a lot of people leaving. We all did at the time we were down there. We're hopeful that a lot of people got out of the building, but we don't know the numbers yet.
Maybe Commissioner Carrick could tell us a little bit about the high-ranking members of the department. I understand one was missing for a while, and you were able to find him. And I believe the police surgeon was medevaced out to New Jersey. Did I get that right?
No, not to my knowledge. Police surgeons accounted for the ranks that we're looking at and looking for are at the ranks of police officer and detectives, and perhaps a few sergeants.
Last question, Deborah Fair. Last one, Deborah Fair.
That's all right.
Is there a coordinated effort right now to find out who exactly may have not been in the building when this happened, or people just calling various companies? How will we find out who was there and who was not there?
Yeah, we're trying very hard by communicating with the Port Authority and some of the major tenants. We're trying to recreate how many people are there. But actually, the major effort is really focused on trying to rescue people. The people who are out, I'm sure, have largely communicated with their families and are doing that. I saw many people doing that on the telephone as we were leaving. So really, the focus of our efforts is to try to get as many people out as possible with the hope that there are still people that are alive, like the ones that we know about.
Mayor, you said earlier that there were several other buildings downtown that may be structurally unsafe that you were still not sure about and that, in fact, may collapse. Has anything changed from earlier today?
No, I don't think so. Not from the last time we had a briefing, and we were down there. And
5 World Trade Center, I heard, was in some kind of trouble. What's the status of 5 World Trade?
I don't know.
They're not going to wait for daylight. Engineers to take a look at all these buildings.
I'm sorry.
We're going to wait till the daylight tomorrow. We'll have building and structural engineers check all these buildings that we're concerned about to make sure they're safe for rescue workers and to see what we can do to salvage these buildings.
Thank you. Thank you.
You can ask your last question. Go ahead. Go ahead. He's been trying. He's been trying for a while.
In terms of how long does the department expect people to survive underneath the rubble like that? I mean, is there some sort of...
They could survive for some time. There's no way to know exactly how long, but it really depends. And I think one of the things that comes out of today is it depends on the will of God, or as to where you are, where you're standing, as this firefighter pointed out to us earlier.
Mr. Mayor, just to clarify something Commissioner Carrick said, you were about 10 minutes past when you were standing with several of the high-ranking officers who you lost, and then you went to Barclay Street, and you thought about that 10-minute gap, how you were 10 minutes from being in a horrible situation.
I haven't had a chance to think about it yet.
But is that sort of accurate, that you would have been with them, you were with them 10 minutes earlier before the building collapsed?
Well, some of the people that we lost, we saw, like Father Judge and Chief Gansey, Bill Feehan. We saw them about 10 minutes before we went over to 75 Barclay Street. And as I talked to their families, and I explained to them that they were working very hard and they were working at what they love to do. And I'm sure their efforts will end up having saved other lives. And their families can be very proud of them. We have, without any doubt, the best police department, the best fire department, the best police officers, the best fire officers, the best emergency workers of any place in the whole world. And although today's tragedy is going to be enormous and there's no way to minimize it, for them, this
Beat is 6, put by Rawlinson just moments ago. And Pfister now working on number 7.
7.
15 seconds.
Easy lockouts for Phil Pfister on the
that one. Peter Baltus trying to get some oxygen and get another one up while Phil Pfister really just...
Locations in Broward County in South Florida and Daytona Beach, also in Florida. These locations with links to the suspected bin Laden supporter who was on that jet manifest.
Okay, as you just heard the mayor in an increasingly somber tone of today's events, we're now talking about life and death stories. The fire department in New York missing 300 firefighters. The police department missing 32 or 33 police officers or detectives. I think a sergeant is involved. And of course, the top brass of the fire department killed. The chief of the fire department, Peter Gansey, the deputy chief of the fire department, Raymond Downey, the first deputy commander, William Feehan, and the fire deputy chaplain, Father Michael Judge. In addition, stories of survival. Survivors have now been reported in the basement at the World Trade Center, calling out on their cell phones to relatives in Seattle. 2 have made those calls, and they say there are more than just themselves down in that basement. For more on the possibility that there are people in that rubble surviving, let's go now to David Lee Miller, who is down there keeping an eye on activities all day long from the first impact today. David, you know, this would be an amazing tale. Somebody in the basement calling out on their cell phone to Ma and Pa in Seattle, hey, I'm here and I'm still alive.
We certainly want to sound overly dramatic here, but you're right, John. It would be nothing short of a miracle if, in fact, people not only survived this horrific attack, but that they're still capable of getting cell phone communication out from underneath the rubble. Because interestingly, throughout most of the day here, there has been very little communication. In fact, most of the media has had a very difficult time just talking with their newsrooms because our cell phones were not working properly. They were simply overloaded. And at one time earlier down here, we actually saw some of the firemen actually break into a cell phone store in the hope that they were going to be able to get walkie-talkies because they needed the communication equipment so badly. But at this hour, as you point out, a massive search and rescue effort is underway. Authorities are searching now, hoping to find the bodies of survivors and as well as those who did not survive this horrific attack. Mayor Giuliani mentioned a short time ago that there have been, as you mentioned, a number of miraculous stories, and they are holding out hope that there will be survivors. But the rescue efforts have been hampered by a couple of reasons. Number one, there was serious fire problems throughout the day here. And secondly, an adjacent building, World Trade Building number 7, was on fire and was feared that it would collapse throughout most of the day. And that's exactly what happened at about 5:40 this afternoon. That building gave way, collapsing, falling to the south in the other direction compared to the World Trade Towers, which fell in the northerly direction. That building now resting on its side. And it's interesting to note that that building, number 7, is the same building where the city of New York has its emergency operations bunker. And that's where the authorities go whenever they have some type of an emergency, such as this one, to coordinate the activities of the police and the fire department. In this case, however, they have obviously had to make do elsewhere. Now, at this hour, as you can see over my shoulder, there is a great deal of emergency equipment down the street here. For the last few hours, we have seen a steady stream of heavy equipment. We've seen cranes, we've seen tractors, we've seen generators, portable lights, all types of equipment getting in place so that they can conduct this massive search. As the mayor said, they have feared the loss now of some 300 firemen, including some of the top brass, as you put it, of the fire department, including the chaplain for the fire department and the fire department chief. Between 30 and 40 policemen are thought to be missing. Now, that is a reduction in the number that we had earlier, which was as high as 78, and we understand that at least a few officers have been located, so that in and of itself is good news. As for the rest of Manhattan, you can leave the island of Manhattan, but don't try coming in right now. The bridges, the tunnels are still closed off, and lower Manhattan is going to be completely sealed off tomorrow. The authorities say that anyone down here other than the authorities working on the search and rescue mission will be charged with a Class B.
Mundo. It doesn't change too drastically because then the terrorists have won. They've accomplished what they set out to do, and that is to significantly alter our way of life. So I think we have to certainly pay much more attention in the short term to security issues. It appears that security at the airports was obviously breached to get these hijackers on the aircraft. I think tomorrow you'll see that significantly strengthened throughout the country. I think life in New York, certainly below 14th Street for the foreseeable future, is going to be different. Tremendous cleanup that has to be done. There's no power in much of that area. There are gas leaks that are happening now. It's a dangerous environment. It is certainly for the foreseeable future going to change life in New York. I hope it's
streets filled with near suffocating smoke, and flames shot up behind it. Some firemen, some policemen, and it's believed many other citizens trapped in the debris and carnage that followed. Mika Brzezinski is in the area tonight. Mika?
Dan, I was back down at the scene where it is extremely slow going for thousands of rescuers, doctors, cops, and firefighters who are realizing by the hour just how massive this catastrophe really is. And these are people who have lost many of their own, and they are trying hard not to lose hope. By nightfall, the mayor of New York City made his way to the scene to assess the damage and boost morale. Heavy hitters and heavy equipment have been hauled in to help. Where the Twin Towers used to be, a slow, confusing search for life is underway.
They're going to be working all night on the rubble, trying to find body recovery, trying to find people that are still alive underneath everything.
It's going to be hectic. Go see the lieutenant right there.
Oh, all the dump trucks are around the corner ready to rock and roll.
Go see the lieutenant.
It is a frustrating maze for people who care, trying to get to survivors like this doctor who rushed from a hospital across town to lend a hand.
Rescue teams are having a hard time getting in the rubble because of danger to the rescue teams themselves. So many firefighters were lost already when the buildings collapsed.
I can remember.
Doing the best.
Bien.
Y causando un número indeterminado de muertes y de lesiones. 24.000 personas trabajan allí.
Lo primero que vimos fue
Los líderes militares de este país no son lo suficientemente buenos como para asesorar a los norteamericanos de cómo entenderle la mentalidad a esta gente.
No sé si lo son, pero los resultados demuestran que falta algo. Primero, para poder combatir al terrorismo, tiene uno que conocer al terrorista, saber quién es el prototipo del terrorista, dónde nacen, dónde crecen, por qué llegan a ser terroristas.
Los Estados Unidos sabe perfectamente bien quiénes son esta gente que se mueve, dónde están.
Pero entonces no hacen mucho para...
¿Cuántas entrevistas se le han hecho a Osama Bin Laden? Se han hecho entrevistas casi todas las revistas norteamericanas, lo hemos visto en canales de televisión, y las fuerzas de inteligencia, los medios de inteligencia de los Estados Unidos, no saben dónde encontrarlo.
No pueden depender de los satélites para inteligencia, satélites solamente. No tiene que tener gente en el terreno. Pero en todo caso, el terrorismo no tiene solución militar solamente. Usted no puede erradicar terrorismo con fuerza militar, punto. La fuerza militar invita a otros actos de terrorismo.
¿Usted piensa de que pudieron infiltrarse a través de la frontera, por ejemplo? ¿Pudieron haber pasado a través de la frontera con México?
Hay muchas hipótesis.
It sliced right through the building. Yeah, we were just hearing from one of our producers that multiple floors were taken out just at the moment of impact, just by the plane, the angle at which it entered the building and the resulting fireballs.
Well, it's a horrifying sight.
It is.
And you notice this one.
It's so appalling.
Yeah, this one struck lower.
Yeah.
Than the other one, trapping more people.
Maximum damage. I mean, it is so appalling. You find yourself at a loss for words. You just look at that and cannot believe people could do that to other human beings.
I want to take a look at some LA Times. This is a courtesy of the Los Angeles Times. Some still pictures that were taken in the area. I think the picture
rescues,
tells the
whole
story.
Look at that.
This is as devastating as anything I can remember seeing in the
covered with
bombing of
ash.
London or the bombing of Hamburg or
This woman is
absolutely incredible.
she is literally covered with ash and debris.
Yeah.
I think that these are images that certainly the people who were there can't ever forget, and I don't think any of us can ever. I just is seared into your mind that people could do that to other human beings.
Yeah, well, here's the LA Times put out a special edition today, and you can see what that is. It's very rare for the LA Times to put out an extra edition.
It
Terror
is,
attack,
right.
hijacked jets fly into Trade Center and the Pentagon.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
You know how it was sheer panic and terror for the people who managed to survive the attack on the World Trade Center. Now, whether they were in one of the Trade Center towers or out on the streets, their stories are just horrifying. And here's what some of them had to say.
I stepped down, and all of a sudden we heard a huge explosion.
Okay.
I looked out my window, and debris was all over the place, and one of the guys in my office said a plane hit Tower 1, get out. People left. The elevators were working at 44, but by the time I got to 44, they made you walk down the stairs. And then by the time we got to the 10th floor, debris and the lights went out.
And she said that she was watching people jump from the first building, and that was before the second explosion that hit her building. And at that point, I was running out.
The first building come down, and it's just the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. Worst thing I've ever seen in my life. We were sitting here for a couple minutes because traffic wasn't really moving, and the second building came down.
I was on top of 111 Wall Street, Citibank. Second plane just crashed directly into the side of the building. When it crashed in, you felt it whole shudder right through the whole building itself. It was like a secondary explosion. I can't even explain how it was.
Just felt it from the initial shot that it might have been something like this, and then a second one hitting those poor people looking. I just.
Do you know anybody in the trade towers?
Yeah, just a few people. Yeah, we do. My wife called. We have a few people at a family that are friends, close friends. So it was just devastating.
And you were hearing from some of the survivors, people who were in the vicinity or in the building at the time of the explosions following the crash of the aircraft into the building. And as we were saying a little bit earlier, Hal, a survey has actually shown that Americans are sort of banding together. 9 out of 10 Americans surveyed this afternoon actually agreed that the terrorist attacks
decided ¿Qué tal? ¿Cómo está?
Bien, muchas gracias.
Yo me imagino.
And more than half, 55% in fact, said they thought Tuesday's attack represents the beginning of a sustained terrorist campaign against the United States that will continue for several weeks. And 3 in 10 disagreed. But based on what we heard earlier this evening from President Bush, that may not be the case. We may find swift action.
Yeah, we also have some further information concerning bin Laden supporters in Florida based on the identification of a suspected hijacker on one of the manifests of the 4 jets that crashed.
And maybe that's why they're not releasing.
What interests me is, how do they suspect a hijacker on one of the manifests? I mean, if he was a suspect, what was he doing on board that plane?
It's almost like it's investigation in reverse.
The FBI was preparing to search locations in Broward County in South Florida and Daytona Beach area, Central Florida. Every possible lead, they say, is being pursued. Authorities in New York are reportedly examining a van based on a lead that it, too, may be connected to the attacks. We're also learning that a flight attendant aboard the second jetliner that struck the World Trade Center managed to call an emergency number from the rear of the airplane. According to a source at American Airlines, that source said the flight attendant reported that her fellow attendants had been stabbed, that the cabin had been taken over by hijackers, and they were going down in New York City.
And at that point, there would be nothing. What could you do? I mean, there would be nothing that could be done. Right now, you're looking at earlier video from today of rescue efforts in Manhattan, down at the World Trade Center. Of course, companies across Los Angeles took extra precautions in the wake of the terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center in New York and on the Pentagon in our nation's capital. Now, as Bill Smith reports, many Los Angeles businesses simply closed their doors and sent workers home amid fears their high-rise buildings could be next.
Downtown LA office workers began heading back home early. LA's high-rises quickly emptying out amid fears that LA's skyscrapers might also be a target of the terrorists. Lawyers, accountants, secretaries, janitors all spilling out onto the streets. At the Arco Plaza, LA's own Twin Towers complex, at 50-plus stories, about half as tall as New York's Twin Towers, unofficial evacuations.
Some of the offices have closed, I think just as a precautionary measure.
Good idea?
Yeah, I think so. We're all much relieved.
Among those evacuating from the LA Twin Towers, Sheila Mathias spoke of friends perhaps lost in the New York Twin Tower terrorist attacks.
I'm sort of relieved that we're going home, but in New York, I do have quite a few friends who work in the World Trade Center, both buildings, and I'm just trying to hold my calm right now until I get more news. I'm unable to get through to New York by phones, and so once I get home, I'm going to be real crazy, just trying to see what I can hear, of any news.
And just across the park from the Arco Twin Towers is LA's tallest building, the 1,000-foot tall Library Tower. Same story. What'd they say inside?
They said that we needed to leave, that there had been threats against the building, and we needed to leave.
The Library Tower, once known also as the first Interstate Bank building, is well over 1,000 feet tall. Not a lot shorter than the New York 1,250-foot Twins. Some feared this, too, might be a target.
Well, they just said that it was a little dangerous for us to be in there and that they were going to close the building down for the day. And they also said that there was that they had heard about some threats against the building.
Wise precaution, you think?
I think it's a very wise precaution.
This scene was repeated throughout downtown Los Angeles. Arriving high-rise employees turned away. Others already inside quickly asked to leave the buildings. Cell phones spreading the word, canceling meetings, changing plans, sheriffs sealing off courthouses, LA's legal system shut down. Busy boulevards quiet. Downtown's usually overflowing parking lots mostly empty. Where are all the cars?
Everybody go home. Nobody work today, maybe tomorrow.
And well beyond tomorrow, flags will fly at half-staff over Los Angeles and the rest of America as well. From downtown L.A., Bill Smith, KTLA News.
Well, there's one rather upsetting figure we just received. We originally told you that as many as 200 firefighters have not been accounted for. Remember, they went in after the first hit,
right,
and they tried to rescue people, and then the building collapsed on them, literally. That number has now been raised to 300 firefighters are missing at the present time and unaccounted for.
Devastating. And also, we were just told that there is the dust alone on the streets is 2 feet deep. And there are fears that some of the people who may have died in this died as they ran away and were literally knocked over and smothered by the dirt in the street as the debris followed them down.
It is a suffocating situation when you have that kind of ash coming down, and believe that some people perished that way also.
Well, and we've heard well, there's nothing left, and the debris is 5 stories high.
Yeah.
I mean, just of concrete and debris.
Well, when something crashes down from 110 stories, 1,250 feet in the air,
right,
it's amazing that it's only 5 stories high.
I mean, it was
That's about 50 feet.
Mashed.
That's about 50 feet, and the building was 1,250 feet high.
That's...
Okay, we want to go to Joe Rico, who reports on exactly how Los Angelinos reacted when they watched this going on in New York. Outrage, sadness, disbelief. some of the emotional reactions to the terrorist attacks on America today. Now, Joe spoke with some local residents here in the Southland.
And all the planes that were in the air that weren't involved in the attacks have now landed safely.
It's cowardice. It's terrible.
I heard it in the car on the way to work, and at first I thought it was the War of the Worlds type thing.
It was an all-too-vivid cheap shot seen round the world. A mortal blow that's dragged the U.S. into the international community of terrorism, forever transforming the landscape of a city, forever horrifying anyone who once believed it can't happen here.
It just looks like it took a lot of planning, you know.
I'm just wondering what next, what next? What's going to happen after this? How do we handle this? And then do they come back again?
The effects of terrorism is coast to coast. Death and destruction on one end, disbelief and caution on the other. In Southern California, business as usual comes to a near crawl. Pasadena's Old Town business cut in half. From restaurants to health clubs, there were very few takers today.
Absolute shock. People are coming in and saying good morning, and they're like, are you kidding?
The dust will settle, and right behind it lurks the question, now what?
I think the U.S. will probably retaliate. How can it go unanswered?
I was in the Gulf War, so I've seen things that a different perspective, and I'll just leave it at that. Something has to happen.
What has happened is Richard Meade, admittedly not a super patriot, just a guy who's heartbroken.
I'm not a flag waver, but this is different. Our country's been attacked.
In Los Angeles, Joe Rico, KTLA News.
Our cyber guy, Kurt Knudsen, has been following the situation online and has some perspectives for us. What do you perceive online now?
Well, from the get-go this morning, we've seen a rush of traffic online. A lot of people logging on to the news sites to try to find out what is happening. And what they found when they went there is that they couldn't get through to many of the news sites. They were actually bombarded with so much traffic that they were shut down. Also, people are going on to America Online right now, and what they're trying to do is talk to one another. They're getting their own grief counseling, and it's all about major news sites that are being jammed today, and web traffic slowed starting this morning instantly, but the internet has proven to be a facilitator for millions of people today. It's an unspeakable tragedy. Terrorist attacks in the World Trade Center in New York and at our nation's capital, the Pentagon. A disaster that strikes to the heart of every American and leaves the entire nation struggling to get information. And the most basic questions, where are friends and family? The attacks make it almost impossible to get a phone call through to New York or Washington, D.C., so millions turn to the internet. Sites like MSNBC and CNN jammed by people trying to get a handle on what happened to these giant 110-story towers. And who's Osama bin Laden, the man who so many people seem to be blaming for all the destruction? CNN's site offered these up-close images of the second plane to strike the World Trade Center and this amazing home video of the building's collapse. This video taken by a doctor risking his own life and remaining in the aftermath after the collapse, trying to help the injured.
They say someone needs help.
Yeah, Mike! Mike over here! Yeah!
Anybody need a doctor?
But these compelling images are not the only reason people are going online. Email and instant messages are replacing phone lines that ring busy from the crippled phone system. Across the country in Berkeley, California, this site is created nearly instantly by university students. Along with Prodigy, here people in New York and D.C. can get the word that they are all right. They offer similar I'm OK message centers to try and help loved ones find each other online, all in hopes of bringing some good news to those who only fear the worst. Well, here are the I'm OK websites to help find people in this disaster. You're looking at the first one that was made up in Berkeley, safe.millennium.berkeley.edu. It's a long, complicated address. Another easier one that was put together by the Prodigy folks is OK, and that's OKAY.prodigy.net. You don't have to be a member of Prodigy to go there. You can simply log on using any online access service or internet service to gain access to OK.prodigy.net. These are the websites that are being used to tell loved ones on the East Coast that you're looking for them, that you need a message. And it's also a place where those on the East Coast that can get access to go online and say, hey, I'm okay.
Let me ask you something. How fast is all this working? Let's say, ordinarily if I want to send an email someplace, send my email, I hit send and it goes. What if I did that right now?
To the East Coast, it's going at the exact same rate as it did yesterday or any other normal day. Earlier today, that was not the story. Earlier today, it was slowed down by about 10 or 20%, say some of the monitoring services that are out there. However, now, because the volume is slowed down for use of news services, you can now go online, you can send email and get it rapidly. Also, what's happening, I was just off the phone with a friend who is on America Online, and he was speaking with a friend in New York. Finally, they made contact online. He was able to say, oh, thank goodness you're okay. You were just a building away from the World Trade Center, right? He said, yes, I was, but I fear that everyone who I was in my office with did not get out. And I'm looking for them online right now. So he's putting in his messages at those sites to try to find the people he works with in New York.
Have you had any experience with trying to place a telephone call to New York recently?
Earlier today, a friend of mine who was a doctor who has happened to be visiting New York, I called to check on, and I could not get through on his cell phone. I later did get through, and it turns out that he ended up going to the scene to see if he could help out, and actually was turned away.
Okay, but you could get through on telephone.
Eventually I did. I was aggressive with it. It was very slow. Oftentimes I got a fast, busy signal
You just
or
had to
simply a
keep
recording.
redialing.
Yeah, I noticed.
Redial and redial.
I noticed also. I tried to make a call to London earlier today, and I couldn't get through. I just could not get through for maybe 5-6 minutes, and then finally I did. Kurt, don't go away. Stay here for a minute. We want to go briefly now to Ron Olson. Where is Ron?
I think he's downtown and
You're at Parker Center.
I'm at Parker Center. We're about to hear from city officials, Los Angeles city officials again. Earlier today, they spent the entire day beneath City Hall East in the Emergency Operations Center. The fire chief, the police chief, the acting mayor, a number of city council people. That is where they were hunkered down. Tonight, they're going to come out here in just a few minutes and give us the very latest on where this city is at. Earlier, they told us that everything is pretty good. There are no credible threats. They said that everything that has been done thus far has been precautionary. The city, nonetheless, the LAPD remains on tactical alert tonight. Everybody still feeling somewhat on edge, but they said the objective at this point is to get everything back to normal. City workers were told they could return to work tomorrow morning. We are going to wait in a few minutes. We'll find out if any of that has changed. No reason to believe it has. Nevertheless, William Bamatri, LA City Fire Chief, Bernard Parks, LAPD Chief, and Acting Mayor Alex Padilla should be out here in just a few minutes, and we, of course, will be here to let you know what they have to say. That's what we have for you from Parker Center at this time. Back to you.
Okay, Ron, thank you very much. Kurt, you said you had some new information for us.
We did just get some information in, an announcement actually from eBay, and they are saying that they have banned the sale of World Trade Center items along with Pentagon-themed collectibles on their site until further notice. So this is a recent rule that eBay put in related to similar tragedies, nothing of this magnitude, but similar tragedies in the past, saying they won't allow the trading of those sort of items online, and now they've come out and said nothing related to the World Trade Center can be traded on eBay, and nothing related to the Pentagon at this time.
Okay.
You know, a couple of cable television, a home shopping network, QVC, put up billboards today and said, we will not be.
I keep on telling people that I think I'm going to wake up to them.
Couldn't see for like 20 seconds.
We came from the 82nd floor, and I don't know what my peers are. I don't know. I hope to God they're okay. And so I can say, I don't know what. We saw a shadow. It looked like a plane. Next thing we know, it was boom, boom, and the floor started shaking.
Right behind us.
It's a war. We've been attacked. It's like World War II.
can't even look at it. Because all I can see are people. I don't see a building, I see people. People hurt. Children without mothers and fathers tonight.
Well, I don't mean this to be self-serving in terms of news gatherers, but we have a lot to thank camera teams and our own ABC News camera teams and the freelancers today who've contributed to all of this, who've helped us to understand the magnitude of this. You just run through those pictures again, and you appreciate, first of all, the danger and the immensity of the tragedy. There's the dust everywhere, the dust and the debris everywhere. It could indeed be an earthquake in some rural place, as we've seen in Turkey and Mexico and Armenia and other places, where everything just gets simply buried. It's small compared to what's happened to entire communities in the past, in that it's in a fairly self-contained area it's a very small area in downtown in New York City, at the very tip of the island of Manhattan, adjacent to the Hudson River. You see all those papers, which are businesses and lives, going up, and then you hear a woman there just simply saying all the children tonight who do not have mothers and fathers, and there is the confusion, and there is the panic, and those constant pictures of the firefighters. Mayor Giuliani said not too long ago, confirmed that 3 senior members of the New York Fire Department and indeed had lost their lives, and we have believed for some hours now that as many or perhaps more than 200 firefighters have lost their lives. And you think of what an enormous event when a single firefighter loses his or her life, mostly his life, in any community in the United States, in most parts of which we have volunteer fire departments. And here we have one of the most professional fire departments.
It was literally like a rocket hitting the building. Now from the other direction, another shot. Balls of fire. And the doomed and the dead begin plummeting out of the buildings. Yet another shot of how that second building was hit by the aircraft. Now, if you're saying to yourself, what made those buildings collapse? Those who constructed the building, those who designed the building, said today that the force of an airplane, even a big commercial jet plane, hitting the building would not have caused the building to collapse. What happened, these aircraft were going so fast, they got into the building, they were loaded with volatile jet fuel. And the explosion and fire of the fuel from the aircraft setting off secondary explosion inside the building, that's what caused both of the Twin Towers to explode and be demolished. The effects of this attack here in New York are being felt far and wide across America.
Is indeed
Will need to be
terrorist attack. While thousands fled for safety, New York City firefighters were heading straight into the blast.
As soon as this happened, people were calling on the phone, every station in the city. How can I help? How can I help?
But with buildings of this size and fires of this magnitude, on this day, even their best wasn't enough.
We tried our best, and it was just too much. It was unbelievable. For me, it was.
When the towers showed signs of collapsing, they scrambled to escape. Most made it, but some couldn't get out fast enough. Exactly how many, we may not know for days.
My house.
But what about the others? At this station, calls started pouring in.
Unfortunately, we don't really have much to tell them.
In all the chaos, there would be no quick answers, just firefighters looking for their lost brothers.
Get our brothers. Get our brothers. A couple brothers are also trapped down there.
It's a scene of frustration and fear. Trucks as far as the eye can see, blocked from going back. And a triage center, already seeing too many firefighters.
Have you ever heard of an incident where so many firemen and so many policemen were hurt?
No, and I used to work at EMS many years ago, and no. I mean, firemen were coming in and telling us that there were 3 rescue companies that never made it out.
As of tonight, as many as 200 firefighters are feared to be dead. Many are missing, and still, the rescue effort has barely begun.
Chris Cuomo on what it's like being firefighters today. There's no way we can catch you up on a lot of news, but I want to go back to an earlier point of day. We have been confused, not to mention concerned about what happened to United Flight 93. This is the one that crashed in rural Pennsylvania earlier today, with 38 passengers and 7 crew members on the board. And this, we learned subsequently, was an airplane that had asked for a change of flight plan and was seeking a flight plan to go in the direction of Washington. And this raised very quickly the question of what actually happened to this aircraft. And the Pentagon denied very early on that this aircraft was in fact shot down by the U.S. military as the only way to prevent it from flying in the direction of Washington. Our investigative team has worked very, very hard on this all day today, and I must tell you at this moment that this is still an open question, very much an open question.
Multinational company.
El presidente de México, Vicente Fox, envía un mensaje de apoyo a la nación norteamericana en desgracia y asegura que se tomaron medidas para garantizar apoyo y protección a los mexicanos que se encuentran en los Estados Unidos.
Aquí en Tijuana, las garitas de cruce fronterizo fueron cerradas temporalmente por la mañana para reanudar sus operaciones en medio de revisiones exhaustivas. Hace unos momentos, una amenaza de bomba obligó al cierre de la garita de San Isidro.
El aeropuerto de Tijuana canceló todas las salidas de sus vuelos hacia los Estados Unidos y recibió 2 aeronaves, una de Corea y otra de Brasil, que tenían como destino final las ciudades de Los Ángeles y San Francisco, California. Los vuelos nacionales operaron en forma normal.
35 iraquíes fueron encontrados en Tijuana sin documentos. Ellos estaban en un hotel y edificio de departamentos y fueron puestos a disposición de las autoridades migratorias de México. Los detalles de Notivisa a las 10 en un momento.
Bienvenidos una vez más, les saluda Mirka de Llanos.
Y María Celeste Herrás, saludos.
Bueno, vamos a comenzar en Nueva York, donde otro edificio está al borde de derrumbarse, cerca de donde estaban las Torres Gemelas, un humo negro visible, el inminente derrumbe del One Liberty Plaza en el World Trade Center, provocando movilización general.
Los rescatistas estaban buscando víctimas bajo los escombros, recibieron la orden de abandonar la zona de inmediato para evitar una nueva tragedia. Se espera que de un momento a otro la estructura del edificio de 54 pisos se venga abajo.
Bueno, y por lo tanto vamos a pasar ahora de inmediato con Pablo Padula, que está en vivo desde Nueva York, a unos pasos de todo esto de lo que está sucediendo.
Pablo, una pregunta. Hay un poco de confusión en cuanto a los edificios en cuestión. Se está hablando de uno que se ha aparentemente desmoronado parcialmente y otro que está a punto de desmoronarse. Tú que estás allí, ¿nos puedes aclarar exactamente qué es lo que está pasando?
Lo que sabemos hasta ahora